All right, so you're gearing up for the MRCEE exam, right? And you know those SLO 7 questions, the ones on the legal stuff, they can feel like a total minefield. Well, in this guide, we are going to cut right through all that noise and give you the high-yield, must-know points you absolutely need to nail it.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to tackle 4 key areas that are pretty much guaranteed to show up on your exam: patient info, getting consent, safeguarding, and a couple of major laws you really can't get mixed up.
Let's just dive right in with a classic exam scenario to get the gears turning. This is exactly the kind of tough call SLO 7 is all about, where knowing the rules isn't just about passing an exam, it's about doing the right thing for your patients. So, let's kick things off with the absolute foundation of our practice, patient confidentiality. If you can get your head around this, you're already way ahead of the game. For your exam, if there's one number you burn into your brain from this section, make it this one: 8. There are 8 Caldecott principles, and these are basically the 10 commandments for handling patient data in the NHS. Now, take a good look at these. They're all crucial, but the one that examiners love to test, especially in emergency scenarios, is Principle 7. It's all about that tricky balancing act. When does your duty to share information to help a patient outweigh your duty to protect their privacy? That judgment call is everything.
And here's a perfect example of just how strict these rules are. You might think, oh, I'll just look up my own blood test results on the hospital computer. Nope, you absolutely cannot do that. It's actually illegal. It really hammers home that access is only for treating patients, not for your own convenience.
And get this, your duty of confidentiality doesn't just stop when a patient passes away. This is a favorite topic for multiple choice questions, so you've got to know how long different kinds of medical records need to be kept.
You just have to memorize these numbers. Seriously, take a screenshot of this if you need to, and pay extra close attention to the mental health records. We heard this exact one came up on a recent exam. It's 20 years in total, or 10 years after death.
Okay, let's move on to the next big one for your exam. And, for just being a doctor: consent and capacity. To put it simply, if you don't have valid consent, you legally cannot lay a hand on a patient.
Think of it like a 3-legged stool. For consent to be valid, it needs all 3 of these legs. You can't pick and choose. If even one is missing, say the patient doesn't really understand, or they're being pressured by family, then that stool falls over. The consent is worthless.
And please remember, consent is not a one-and-done signature on a form. It's an ongoing process. A patient can say yes, you can leave the room to get your kit, and by the time you come back, they can say no. And if they have capacity, their no means you stop. Period. All right, let's shift gears to a topic that is 100% everybody's business, from the day one junior doctor to the head of the department: safeguarding our vulnerable patients.
So, what does vulnerable adult actually mean? Well, the legal definition is really broad, and that's on purpose. It covers anyone who, for whatever reason, age, illness, a disability, can't protect themselves from being harmed or taken advantage of. So how do we protect them? Well, a lot of the time, it means we have to share sensitive information. And I know what you're thinking, doesn't that clash with confidentiality? Well, not exactly. There are actually 7 golden rules for sharing info in safeguarding cases. And yeah, they are very, very testable. Here's the absolute bottom line on this. Well, confidentiality is king. The law says you must break it if you need to share information to protect a child or vulnerable adult from serious harm. Laws like GDPR aren't there to stop you. They're there to make sure you can share that information safely and legally. Okay, listen up, because some version of this question is pretty much a free point on your exam. They want to know that when things get complicated, you know who to call for backup. And here are your magic answers. If you get an MCQ about a tricky safeguarding case, look for one of these 3 options: your hospital's safeguarding lead, the Caldecott guardian, that's the person in charge of patient data, or your medical defense organization. I guarantee one of them will be the right answer. Just lock those into your memory. All right, we're in the home stretch now. Let's wrap up with 2 specific laws that pop up all the time on the exam, and they both have some nitty-gritty details you really need to know. The single biggest change you need to be aware of is that in England, this system completely flipped. We went from opt-in, where you had to sign up to be a donor, to opt-out. This means the law now assumes that every adult is okay with donating their organs when they die, unless they've officially said no. And of course, you know what examiners love to ask about, right? The exceptions. You have to know who is not included in this opt-out system.
These 4 groups are prime MCQ material, so make sure you know them inside and out.
Okay, get ready for a classic exam trap. They'll give you a scenario and ask if a patient can donate their organs. Now, some things are an absolute no-go, like CJD or an active cancer. But what about HIV?
And the answer is no, it is not an absolute contraindication. A person with HIV can, in fact, donate organs specifically to a recipient who also has HIV. Don't let them catch you out on that one.
Now, I know this table looks a bit scary, but there's a really simple trick for remembering this for the exam. Just look at the emergency sections, Section 4, Section 5.2, and Section 136, which is the one the police use. What do they all have in common? They all last for 72 hours. If you just group them in your head like that, it's so much easier to remember under pressure.
So there you have it. We've gone through the principles, the pillars, and the key laws, all the high-yield stuff you need for the exam. But the real question, the one you'll face every day, is this. The rules give you a map, but when you're in the middle of a chaotic ED shift, can you navigate the tricky ethical landscape in real time? That is the real test.